Salutations and welcome to the James and Tom Do Horror Podcast, a podcast where two horror-obsessed filmmakers choose a different subgenre each show and pick their favourite old movie, favourite contemporary movie, and favourite obscure movie from that subgenre. I'm Jimmy P of Mad Science Films, filmmaker and sexual astronaut, and I'm joined by my co-host...
Tom Hughes from Ritual Video.
And so, this episode, it was my choice of subgenre, and I chose the Giallo subgenre. So... big fan of the subgenre, absolutely love it, really excited to. Last episode we were talking about Christmas horrors, which kind of neatly segued into this subgenre. Tom, what's your experience with the Giallo subgenre?
It was something that I kind of didn't know about for ages and skirted around. I kind of seen Suspiria, maybe I'd seen Torso, the Sergio Martino film. I hadn't seen a huge amount of Italian stuff. And then I got into Fulci, I think, when I was... I don't know, in my teens, I guess, I got into a real... I saw Zombie, and then I kind of went back through everything and kind of ended up with like New York Ripper and Murder Rock and all that slightly more obscure stuff. And yeah, I think from there then, maybe I watched... What was that? Don't Torture a Duckling he did, didn't it? So
yeah,
maybe I saw that, and that was my way in. And then once I got into it, I just fell into the rabbit hole then, like everyone does with Giallo, I think, because once you watch a few and you get the style and you get the music and the way it looks and the fashion and everything, you're like, oh, this is great, man. It's got so much more style than modern films. That's why I love it.
Oh, definitely, man, definitely. I mean, for me, yeah, I think you've hit it on the head. It's the visuals of it that really cemented my love for it. Like, in my head, it kind of feels like the Italian colour version of those film noir movies.
Yeah.
Because you've got, like, the mystery plot elements. But obviously, they kind of pushed it to another level with the color aspect, with the camera moves, and they were upping the gore and everything like that. So yeah, I mean, for me, it's always been a really nice mix between kind of like hard-boiled film noir mystery, the horror elements, and then just all coated in amazing visuals, which I think similar kind of place with you. I started with Argento, went back and discovered Bava, and then just went on a trip to find as much stuff as I could find. And I think, as we're both filmmakers as well, we really appreciate any time anybody spends as much effort as they can making their film look as gorgeous as they possibly can as well.
That's the amazing thing, is really what you're watching is really classic filmmaking. It's like watching an old 50s or 60s film, but with the extra ingredient of like sleaziness, which I really love. So they've taken the B-movie horror style stuff and added that into what is a really classy story, the murder mystery, and the way it's shot, really classy, the locations, all the people are beautiful. Like they're almost like fashion adverts, the way they look and they're presented and everything. I mean, but then they add this really kind of grimy, sleazy undercurrent that's a bit sexual and a bit violent and a bit like exploitative at places, and it's just this really great mix, isn't it, of
so what kind of age were you when you found the Giallo films for the first time?
I think I was probably maybe 19, 20, maybe a little bit older. I think I kind of must have got in through zombie stuff when I was 14, 15, and then got into slashers and everything, and then from slashers maybe got into it. I think I'd read some stuff on because at the time then I would have been like, okay, so Halloween's the first slasher film or whatever, and then when you start reading stuff online, you're like, oh, what's Bay of Blood? Why do they keep talking about that? Like, what's Blood and Black Lace? So then you go back and look, isn't it? And then
and I think at the time it was almost easier to read about it than it was to actually find these films.
It was hard to find. Shameless were doing like Shameless
not great copies
stuff,
either.
But they were always kind of patchy DVD things, or like cut versions of Vipco things, like even like Bloody Moon, the Jess Franco films, like that was really hard to find uncut for ages. I watched it on the only time I found it was on YouTube uncut, actually, because I bought the DVD and they'd cut the hell out of it.
Yeah, no, I was exactly the same, man. I think Vipco was the first way I discovered a lot of the Giallo stuff. I think it would have been one of the Argentos. I can't remember which one they put out. but I kind of tracked them all down there, man, and just kind of watched them back to back.
Yeah.
Anyway, so moving on to our picks, because what you said links really nicely. So my old pick is 1964's Blood and Black Lace, directed by Mario Bava. Like you said, man, it's set in the fashion world. So there's this great sleazy cutthroat element where all these models and designers are just absolute bitches to each other, backstabbing, cutthroat. And stylistically, for me, this is where the Giallo films began, the subgenre. So Bava, he kind of created the subgenre overall in an earlier film called The Girl Who Knew Too Much, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But that's very much the plot, in terms of the setup and everything like that. But visually, I think this is the film that inspired everything that came afterwards, with its frame composition, its lighting, camera movement, right down to lens choices, production design, and everything like that. When we now think of Giallo films, it's all laid out in that initial film, Blood and Black Lace, for me. You've got so many of the images, the mask killer,
the black gloves, the cutthroat
yeah.
razor,
Yeah, and what I love is, obviously this is the first time it's kind of setting this stuff up, but the mask, this like white sheet, looks so much pulled tight over his face, looks so much like the mannequins that you see through the film. The cat and mouse chase of the film. Again, all of these kind of things just inform the rest of the subgenre for years to come. I don't think it can be overstated. Even like as early as it is back in 1964, you watch it today and it's still visually stunning. And there are so many tricks that he kind of invented and created there, with camera movements, split lens, like a lot of the split lens choices and stuff like that. I watch it now and, I kind of like, wow, we're people are still kind of ripping off this film. What are we talking about? Like 60 years later, nearly, which is mental for me. So, Blood and Black Lace. Tom, have you seen this film?
Yeah, it's one of my favourite films. Like I saw it, maybe around that time that I was getting into things, like early 20s, and it blew my mind. Like if you don't watch the title sequence and are completely in love with it by the time the end of the titles happen, then maybe it's not the film for you, because the title sequence is literally one of the most beautiful title sequences I've ever seen. Like the amount of care that goes into lighting, just like still portraits essentially of the characters in the titles. Yeah,
it's fantastic. And it mirrors them with mannequins. So again, this is a criticism of Giallo films all the way through. It's style over substance. Yeah. But with this one, the style is the substance. So as you say, they're posed like mannequins. Like any other film, you just have black screen, title cards pop up, and then boom, you're into the film. But as you say, like the amount of time and care put into this is stunning.
The colours are all complementary to each other. Like even the moving light, like if you watch the new Blade Runner that Deakins did, like the way he's moving light in the hallways that they move through when they're in Jared Leto's place is the same thing that Bava was doing in Blood and Black Lace. Like there are so many rooms, they're rooms that you've seen, and then he relights them in darkness and just has light move through them, and it makes them completely different. And he's creating these lovely little patches of light for people to hit. And how the actors in Bava's films hit their marks is beyond me, because they're hitting 4 lighting marks in every move they're doing, and they're turning to get their faces lit like perfectly. It's amazing. Like, from a technical perspective, Bava is
amazing. Focus as well, definitely.
He's amazing.
So Tom, what have you got for us for your old pick?
So my old pick is Sergio Martino, after mentioning Torso earlier, but it's not Torso, it's All the Colours of the Dark.
Nice.
Because it's kind of his most psychedelic. So he did a few Giallos around that time, didn't he? He did. I can't remember what else he did.
Yeah, definitely Torso, which a lot of people say is kind of like the proto slasher as well.
I love
So it's
Torso.
one of those ones which is like fun fact. I did an amazing interview with Dr. Michael Coven for the US Arrow release of Torso, and basically, although I think it was cut down to a half-hour thing, we like the uncut version of that is like a 2-hour chat, which we had all about Torso and its place in the Giallo subgenre and how it basically helped create the slasher subgenre.
And then he took it further with All the Colours of the Dark and made this really cool. It always reminds me of the Norman Warren Satan's Slave. If you've
Yeah,
ever seen his,
I can see
that's
that.
really English, obviously, but yeah, it's kind of a similar plot and a similar is it real, is it not real thing going on. But yeah, amazing look to it. A lot of psychedelic stuff, a lot of prism lenses and twirling cameras, and like the way it's shot is amazing. There's a lot of really classic camera moves where they track with people, but then they'll whip pan into something else when they see something. And it's got, the name's really hard to say, it's Edward Fenech, I think it is. Maybe.
I'm glad you said it first, mate, because I would have struggled too.
Yeah, so it's got her in it. She's obviously amazing, really beautiful woman in it, and she was a bit of a Giallo queen for a bit. She did a few of Martino's films because she was married to his brother Luciano. So Luciano was producing all his stuff at the time, which is why he's always produced. Luciano Martino's always the producer. She married him, and then she did your Vices of the Locked Room and Only I Have the Key. Oh no, what was it? There's A Strange Vice of Mrs. Ward. Your Vice to Locked Room and the Key. Case the Scorpion's Tail and All the Colours of the Dark. But yeah, it's a really amazing film. It's another one that has a really distinct 70s style. The music is super 70s. I think it might be Stelvio Cipriani that did the soundtrack. But it still stands up now as like a really like interesting film to try and work out what's going on. And well, do you know the name of the guy with the really piercing blue eyes? He was in loads of Giallo. What's his name?
Is it Ivan Rasimov?
Yeah, it's Ivan Rasimov is in it. He's this amazing looking, like really chiseled looking dude with these piercing eyes. And I don't know if he had contacts in for this film, but his eyes are like bright blue in this film, and they light across them a lot and do slow pull-ins on them when he's like hypnotizing people and things. It's really cool.
I hadn't seen it for a few years, but when you told me, that you were going to pick it, I rewatched it the other day. Absolutely love it. I love that 70s occult cults kind of thing going on. It was definitely that period of time, post Rosemary's Baby, all that kind of stuff. So it was brilliant. I mean, it's set in England. It's very Italian though. I love all the almost, like 10 years too late for the swinging 60s, but that kind of vibe still.
There's a lot brilliant. Of turtlenecks, and I think maybe some women get backhanded in it. That's they do quite tend a bit to backhand a woman across her face in Italian Giallos. That's the only thing.
there's a fair bit of that, and usually it's in inverted commas, guys, for their own good
because they're hysterical. Yeah. Oh man.
But yeah, no, it was so much fun rewatching, dude. So yeah, good pick.
It's a super stylish film. That's the main thing I love about Giallos is how much style they've got. Like every camera movement, they're not just going to do a slow creep the way you would these days. They're going to do a fast. Crazy fast kind of faulty zoom in on somebody's eyes, and all the sound design is really crazy, and the music is so OTT and amazing. I think one of my favourite things about All the Colours of the Dark and Giallos in general is not necessarily the horror stuff or the really crazy stuff or the pumping soundtracks like the Goblin style driving bass soundtracks. It's the pleasant day moment. When they have like really twinkly, beautiful, upbeat piano music. It's a bit like lounge jazz. And it's just like two women talking in a park or whatever, having a stroll, or someone's out shopping. And I love how cheesy. They always seem to do that. Oh, we need to make it a bit lighthearted now. And they do this really happy moment where it's really twinkly and lovely. I love that shit, man.
It's a great choice, and I think you hit the nail on the head because it's got that occult thing. He's able to kind of go a bit more psychedelic with it, which I think that follows her slowly going crazy, slowly going insane thing. So it's like what's real, what's not is what she's seeing, and what obviously we as the audience are seeing. Is that actually happening, or is it all in her head? Which is a great trick, and Martino gets great mileage out of it.
There's a shot in it where she's just looking in a mirror, and the mirror wraps. It's ahead of her, and it also wraps around the side. And I think there's 3 or 4 versions of her split by these mirrors, and each version is slightly distorted. She's just looking at herself in a mirror, but that to me is one of the strongest Giallo images, just because. And also, with the theme of the film as well, isn't it? That she doesn't know who she's looking at, or what's going on, or what's real, or whatever. That's what's amazing about people like Martino. And they don't get enough credit for it. I suppose after that, then he was doing stuff like 2019 After the Fall in New York, which is super cheesy, awesome B-movie stuff.
So moving on to the new picks. My new pick is from 2009, Amir. directed by Helene Catet and Bruno Forzani. So I saw this way back when in 2010 at Abattoir, the horror film festival in Aberystwyth. Definitely my film of that year at the festival. Really funny thing about the screening was the distributors sent a copy of the film without subtitles, but very early on you realize there's only about 2 or 3 lines of dialogue, so you can kind of get away with it. And because it is so confident in its visual storytelling, you don't need it. You know, it's doing everything it needs to do with the picture. Technically, maybe not a giallo, as it's not based in Italian, but it's definitely a love letter to the genre. Yeah, Tom, have you seen this?
I love these guys, man. Catet and Forzani are amazing. I'd seen this one. I went back and watched the Yellow Room. The short they did, just shorts, one person in a room, which is amazing, really, really great. Yeah, pretty much everything they've done I've really, really loved. I think maybe Amma was the first one I saw.
There's like 3 sequences, so really it's kind of like an anthology film, but following the same character. So it's her as a small girl, her as a teenage girl, and then her as an adult woman. And, you know, each one kind of follows a different type of giallo. So like the first one is very Bava. I'd say
cool and creepy. The first one,
yeah,
it's pretty creepy.
The second one feels very much like Don't Torture a Duckling. You know, it's got that rural giallo feel, which was quite rare. You know, very, very often, you know, most giallos are set in a city, you know, where crazy stuff, sleazy stuff does happen. But occasionally you'd get these giallos set in the rural things. And then I'd say that the final sequence felt to me very much like Argento, very much bridging that Bird with the Crystal Plumage meets Suspiria kind of vibes as well. Absolutely loved it. I binge watched this so many times in preparation for doing Silent Night Bloody Night because, you know, for me that was the easiest way to kind of get concentrated giallo vibes, and kind of like I was making so many notes on that film to basically rip off because, you know, I wanted our Christmas slasher to be a Christmas giallo, so that's kind of what we did. But yeah, it was such a divisive film. Like I came out of that screening at Abattoir, and I turned around and I went, "Oh man, wasn't that awesome?" And literally, it was split down the middle. Yeah. Other people really dug it, and people were like, "No, that was pretentious shit."
Yeah, people just think it's super boring. I've showed it to people, and they've been like, "This is so fucking boring. Nothing happens. It's just close-ups of eyes and lips." I'm like, "Yeah, it's awesome."
You just but they lit
red. They look great.
Yeah, I've managed out of the 3 films I've seen, 2 of the 3 I've managed to see on the big screen. And for me, that's definitely the best way to watch it, is just let the images wash over you and you get caught up in it. I love all 3 of their films, but I'm always gutted that I never got to see... what was the name of the
new one?
Well, the third one, the newest, I think.
Let the Corpses Tan?
That's the one. I'm gutted.
I'm pretty sure it's on Shudder.
It was on Prime Video, but yeah, it's one of the films good, I really wish... Yeah, I loved it, but I really wish I'd seen it on the big screen, because I think, again, that would have been
It's
epic
cool how Let the Corpses Tan has got a lot more plot than the other stuff they've done. It's the one with the most story, but they're still doing kind of psychedelic cool stuff.
Yeah, I'd say it's probably the least pretentious in a way.
Yeah, it's the least arty of all...
But yeah, and then for me that follows more of the, and I'm going to butcher this, the Policetti, you know, like the police movies rather than giallo, but there's still very strong giallo vibes. You know, it reminds me a lot.
What blows my mind about all the films they've done is the sound design. So it's I watched their films to rip off as well when I did A Date with Death. The giallo short thing I made last year, and they'll have the sound of leather gloves cracking over a knuckle, and they'll put someone's breath in on a shot of someone's mouth, and the sound design is amazing. I love it when they build up kind of an ambient thing going on, and then they'll do these quick cuts with quick bits of sound in, just to jolt you out of whatever place they're putting you in. That's what they're really amazing at. If you have to go, I think you have to go in and watch their films with the idea that you're just going to sit back and just go on this ride for an hour and a half. And if you kind of turn your brain off and just enjoy the visuals and the sound of it, you end up with this really cool experience, because they take you on this roller coaster just with sound and visuals. It's literally pure filmmaking, isn't it?
Do you know what I think would work really well? Obviously, if you can't watch it in a cinema, I would love to see it like almost on a VR experience where
That'd be
got these
amazing.
goggles and stuff. Because as you said, the sound design is so important. It's so immersive that being able to just be locked into the world of that be fantastic, man.
Yeah.
Brilliant, dude. So
Speaking
what
of
have
sound
you got?
design,
Yep. What's your
hell
new
of a
pick?
segue. Okay, so sound design. My new pick is Barbarian Sound Studio by Peter Strickland. I love Peter Strickland stuff, similar to Catet and Forzani. Like, everything he does is a modern Giallo. The way he shoots, the lenses he's using, the camera moves he's doing, the really cool, stylish music he's putting over everything, the settings, everything is literally super classy, slightly sleazy Italian cinema from the 70s. But it's amazing that he's getting these projects made for, decent amounts of money in kind of the UK. Thankfully, like people like Film 4 or whatever are putting money behind him so he can actually make the stuff. But Barbarian it wasn't the first feature he did. I think it was the first feature that kind of got out there a bit more, wasn't it? He did a film called Cattle in Varga, which was possibly shot in Romania, I want to say. It's on Mubi, you can watch it in the UK. It came on there last week, I think. I watched it for the first time last week. It's really good. It's more of kind of like a rural drama than anything else, but it's still a really good film. But then Barbarian is where I think he really took that 70s Giallo influence and just turned it up to 11. But in the middle of it is Toby Jones playing a really very British, very reserved, quiet man who just wants to go to work and then do his job and is really struggling with the job he's doing. So it's about a sound designer going to Italy to sound design a kind of a period folk horror film in Italy. But he didn't know what kind of film he's working on, and when he gets there, it's about torture, and there's a lot of snapping celery and pulling out clumps of hair and burning witches and horrible things he has to sound design that he wasn't quite prepared for, and he spends this time.
I love the line, dude, because he does nature films back home.
Oh yeah,
and so when he gets the letter, he's like, "Oh, I didn't realise it was this kind of film. It said it was the Equestrian Vortex. I thought it was about horses."
Yeah,
and it was just like, you can imagine that actually happening, because of course, like post Argento with like all of his like horror animal titled films. You got Four Flies on Grey Velvet. You've got Bird with a Crystal Plumage, Cat of Nine Tails. You can imagine that mix-up kind of happening. And I absolutely love that fish out of water thing where you've got the most British of all people in this like very Italian location setting with all these people.
People keep kissing him on the cheek and he looks really uncomfortable, and everyone's telling him to relax all the time, and he's worried about money and getting his flight ticket reimbursed and all that kind of British stuff. But as a film, is very much not a British film. It's a very Italian film. It feels Italian. It's nice for film nerds and sound nerds because all the gear's really old and you've seen a lot of sound design, and they're recording on tape on a reel-to-reel, which is cool. And you're seeing people do kind of Foley work and ADR work and all this kind of interesting stuff for nerds who like films. But the film actually ends up being quite a psychedelic. So, I mean, similar to All the Colours of the Dark, I suppose. I am a bit of a hippie, so I'm a bit predisposed to kind of when stuff gets trippy, I'm like, oh, this is great.
Yeah, and I think it's a similar plot-wise in terms of it's a guy losing his mind, whereas, like All the Colours of the Dark is a girl losing their mind. I absolutely love it. The visuals, you've got like the projector being always switched on by, this unseen person with the black gloves on, and it's fantastic. Every part of that film. Again, I was lucky to see this at the cinema, and it was a fantastic experience, man.
Definitely worth checking out his other films too. He did one after that called The Duke of Burgundy. That's a really cool film. That starts one way and ends up kind of being another kind of story. That's a really classy, beautiful film that's somewhere between Barbarian and Cattle and Varga. And then In Fabric, his new one as well, was really good.
I love In Fabric. What I love about In Fabric is that feels very British.
Yeah.
That feels very much like those Amicus, Trigon 70s films. Very much like the Pete Walker, Norman Warren, who we mentioned earlier. Absolutely loved it, and I love again how that kind of just the plot jumps, you know, from character to character. You know, yeah, absolutely beautiful stuff. I haven't actually seen his first one. I want to catch his first one. So that's out on Mubi at the moment.
It's on Mubi, yeah. You can watch it on Mubi in the UK. And definitely watch everything that Peter Strickland does and keep an eye on him, because he's a really amazing filmmaker, I think. He's one of the only really stylish filmmakers in the modern UK film scene, I'd say. Like, he makes super classy, stylish movies that people either really marmite.
No, have you heard about his new one?
No.
So he's got one. I don't know how far along it is. I think again everything got a bit delayed with COVID and stuff like that. But it's set in the world of like restaurants and like, you know, cuisine, high cuisine, and all this kind of stuff. So I'm really looking forward to see what he does in that kind of world. I imagine it's going to be pretty gross, and the sound design on that is going to be a bit stomach churning.
Yeah. Perfect world to put a Giallo in, isn't it? Any kind of classy, any kind of classy establishment is the perfect setting for a Giallo, I'd say.
That's currently on Arrow Player as well. So if people in the UK want to catch that's the place to get it. Okay, so then going obscure. Now, this definitely used to be obscure when I first saw it. It's now debatable whether it's obscure because Arrow have put out an amazing release of this film. But I've gone back to 1971 with The Fifth Chord, directed by Luigi Bazzoni. Absolutely love this film. I would argue this is the best-looking Giallo film ever shot. And that is really just down to, and again, I'm going to butcher the name, the DP for this is Vittorio Storaro. So this was the DP
He shot a lot of stuff, right, Storaro? I know his name.
Yeah. So he shot Apocalypse Now.
Oh, okay. That's why I know his name. Right, okay.
Yeah, The Last Emperor. He worked with Francis Ford Coppola on a bunch of films. I think he also did stuff like Tucker. Beautiful. This is one of those films. And it's a bit of a cliche. People say this a bit too often, but honestly, it's true in this thing. Every frame of this movie could be a painting that you'd print it out and you'd put it up on your wall and you could just stare at it for hours. It is one of the most gorgeous films ever. It also helps. It's got a really solid mystery element running through it, which I really enjoyed. There are parts of it where it almost kind of gets stereotypical, a bit cliched, but that is undercut for me by Franco Nero, who actually gives, for me, one of his best performances. Like Franco Nero, you know, most people know as Django. He did, you know, a lot of Italian cinema. He was like in the 60s and 70s. Yeah. In the 60s and 70s, he was, you know, the superstar. In this film, like his character's like the grizzled journalist who drinks too much, he's always hungover, sleeps around or whatever. But he actually gives like this strange element of like fragility to the character, so you actually give a shit. And you know, he goes out, he's drinking and he's sleeping around, but he doesn't actually ever want to hurt anybody, and he feels guilty about it and everything like that. I love the film, honestly, guys. It's out on the Arrow Player. You can buy it on Blu-ray. I definitely recommend getting it, you know, best quality as you can. There are bits where, like in most Giallo films, you know, the standout scenes are the kill scenes, right? You know, so, you know, you get the amazing camera movement and lighting and, you know, grisly stuff happens. That happens in this. But often the most gorgeous scenes are just two people talking. And the way that Storaro, like, composes the shot, you know, frame blocks the characters and then lights it, you know, often using reflective surfaces and all of this. Loads of Venetian blind lighting in this film as well. It is just gorgeous.
And there's
so,
some
Tom,
amazing set pieces in
have you seen this?
Yeah. It's good, man. There was bits of it I really loved. There's a part with a woman who's in a wheelchair, wakes up at night and hears a noise and has to investigate it in a house, which is really great. And I love the end. There's some wides doing the set pieces at the end in the locations that are absolutely amazing. For me, it reminded me of kind of like a Bird with Crystal Plumage or like Tenebrae, or it was kind of a much more police procedural Giallo than what I'd normally watch. But I really enjoyed it. I thought the kills were cool. And the story, like you said, the story stands out really, doesn't it? As being like a much more solid. It reminded me of the kind of films that I used to watch with my granddad on a Sunday afternoon. When, I mean, obviously it's a bit more of a violent version of what we used to watch on daytime telly. But I feel like I could put that film on for people and they wouldn't be as repulsed as they are with what I normally put on for people. So it was quite a straight down the middle police movie, which was cool, I thought. But like you said, shot amazing with a lot of style and some cool music and some turtlenecks and mustaches.
Yeah, there's plenty of that. There's plenty of, yeah, like, just, it's a great drinking game film as well. Like, every time he wakes up hungover, not knowing where he is, you take a drink and you'll end up as drunk as he is. So, I mean, actually, the whole start of the film is like he witnessed like the inciting incident, but he was so drunk that like throughout the film, it's him gradually remembering it. So it's just it again, and the way they kind of like just unfurl like the plot, the mystery elements, or whatever, is so well done. Yeah, no, absolutely love it. Yeah, yeah. So Tom, what have you got as your obscure pick?
I really struggled with this one. So I had a few. I was going to do House with the Laughing Windows by Pupi Avati, but I watched it again and I was like, I'm not quite sure. There was a few other things I'd considered, but then I ended up settling on Knife and Heart, which is a newer film. It's 2018. It was directed by Jan Gonzalez. Haven't seen any of his other films, but French guy, French movie, super stylish, and set in a world that you wouldn't necessarily expect a Giallo to be set in. So it's a Giallo in that there is a masked and gloved killer picking off people, and it's a Giallo in the lighting and the style of it or whatever. But it's set in the world of gay porn, and it's about a gay porn producer, and the people who are in her movies are getting picked off, and they're trying to work out what's going on with it. But it's much less of a police procedural than it is kind of a group of people fearing for their lives and trying to work out what's going on. But there's some amazing music in it. There's some really great set pieces in it. There's some really great acting in it. I was surprised. It was one of those ones I was kind of looking for newer Giallo type things, and it was recommended on a list. And I was like, oh great, so maybe I can watch it now. I wasn't prepared for the amount of gay porn in it, I don't think. So perhaps, choose where and when you watch it kind of wisely. Don't put it on if people are going to like be uncomfortable or whatever, or there's anybody young around, because it is kind of graphic in the stuff it shows. But yeah, it was really cool. It was a really surprisingly original movie that took the Giallo tropes and put them into this world of kind of bondage and S&M and the underground sex scene and stuff that you wouldn't necessarily expect it to be in. But you could tell the director really knew the genre well,
Yeah, definitely, man. Yeah, I absolutely love Knife and Heart. I saw it a couple of years ago. I think it was at the very beginning of lockdown, and Mubi were kind of doing a free 30-day thing. So I signed up for it just so I could watch Knife and Heart. Absolutely loved it. Absolutely loved it. I'd actually argue with you, mate. I think, if anything, it's the perfect setting for this film. Again, going back to the Blood and Black Lace thing, it's a very cutthroat, very bitchy environment.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's also, like, what I love about it is again, going back to stuff like Barbarian is, it plays with representation. What's on screen and what's not on screen. Is it, if it happens on screen, is it real or whatever?
Yeah.
And the producer almost, turns the events of the film into her own gay porn film as well. And I love that play. With different layers of reality in the film. Haven't rewatched it, but will have to track it down again. Is it still on Mubi?
Yeah, it's still on Mubi. When I saw it, I think a few months ago, I watched it on there. It's definitely worth a watch, especially if you're looking for kind of modern stuff and you've seen all the Peter Strickland films.
Yeah.
It's definitely worth watching as a kind of weird modern pick.
So those are our picks. So we'll go on to honourable mentions, so films that didn't quite make the list. So one of the ones I mentioned earlier was Bava's earlier film from 1963, The Girl Who Knew Too Much, aka The Evil Eye, which is a bizarre, title, but there we go. Plot-wise, this is where I think everybody agrees that the Giallo film started. Shot in stark black and white, so it's very much visually like a throwback to those film noir films that we were talking about earlier. I love this film. It's very much kind of cements the... there's an everyman character, the girl in this who decides, she saw something, nobody believes her, so she's going to solve this murder that she thinks happens. And, drags in John Saxon in a very early role, as her sidekick, and away they go to try to solve this murder. Absolutely love it. It's a fun watch. It feels very modern even now, watching it. Really makes use of, Rome and its public spaces, shot beautifully. I for me, the perfect film would be a combination of The Girl Who Knew Too Much and utilizing the later visuals of Blood and Black Lace. I think that would have been an epic combo if they'd managed to do that. Another one, I feel we can't really skip over Argento. We can't do a Giallo episode without talking of Argento. His contribution to the genre is amazing. I think a lot of people argue that Deep Red is the perfect Giallo. I dig that one, but my own personal favorite is probably the first of his Giallo films that I saw, which is The Bird with the Crystal Plumage. Very Hitchcockian and beautiful. Then I'm going to cheat a little bit and talk about what I call the American Gialli films. So last episode we talked a bit about Silent Night, Bloody Night, and I made the argument that is an American Giallo / proto-slasher. Staying on the slasher kick, I'd argue that the very first Friday the 13th is also a Giallo film, American Giallo. So you've got, the identity of the killer is hidden. You've got the psychosexual element to it.
Yeah.
So what I'd encourage people to do is, like, Friday the 13th is quite easy to get hold of. Rewatch it, thinking of it as a Giallo film, and see. Like, obviously, it's been well documented that, Sean Cunningham was inspired, shall we say, by Bay of Blood, also by Mario Bava. And, a lot of people would argue that, Bay of Blood is either a Giallo or a proto-slasher. Go back.
One of the proto-slashers, Bay of Blood, isn't it?
Yeah.
Kills are fucking brutal in Bay of Blood as well, man. It's awesome.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I love the reveal on Bay of Blood as well.
Yeah.
And another one is very much in the spirit of Barbarian Sound Studio, so a love letter to that is The Editor by the Astron 6 guys.
Yes.
Again, I don't know which came first or whether they even saw Barbarian Sound Studio, but it's rather than a sound designer slowly losing his mind while working on a Giallo film, it's an editor losing his mind while working on a Giallo film.
With a wooden hand, an editor with a wooden hand losing his mind. Yeah. Wonderful film, absolutely spot on. Yeah. Every single genre trope is in there, even to the point where the dubbing is slightly off. They've just shifted it just far enough out of time that the dubbing's a little bit wrong. There's problems with the sound. Songs cut off very abruptly between scenes, which I love about like classic Giallos. They do such a wonderful job of sending it up.
Yeah, they are clearly such genre fans that they've done their homework and they've just imbued this film with everything they love about that subgenre. So definitely,
there's
if you want something,
J&B and loads of scenes. Yeah. There's. I mean, it's just. Even the really convoluted plots, like they take the plot to the point where it's like ridiculous how convoluted it is, which is amazing, and they keep doing reveal after reveal after reveal. It's just like, I think maybe if you haven't started with Giallos and you've heard us say a bunch of films, like, okay, they sound cool, I'll check them out. Maybe watch some of those first, and then get your hands on The Editor by Astron 6, and then just enjoy how amazingly pitch perfect their kind of pastiches of the whole genre. It's such a good film.
Absolutely,
amazing.
For me, it's the Barbarian Sound Studio played for laughs, and I'm fully on board with that. I absolutely love it.
I think it's the best film they've made. I really like the Astron 6 stuff. Like Manborg was fun. Father's Day was absolutely crazy and totally cool.
Father's Day.
But I think technically, I mean, obviously now Stephen Costanza has gone on to do like Psycho Goreman and he's doing a lot of effects stuff on bigger things, and so that's awesome that it took them to that place. But when they were still doing kind of really underground stuff with just I think maybe 4 of them, isn't it? 4 or 5 of them. I feel like they honed themselves over like 10 years and made a whole bunch of really great shorts, made a lot of really indie features, a lot of green screen stuff, and then Father's Day was a super crazy slasher thing about a guy raping dads. And then when they got to do The Editor, they had gotten so good at filmmaking by that point. They actually, even though it's a comedy, they made a really, really good, well-made film, It's a shame more people don't know about Giallos well enough to be able to appreciate how good The Editor is. It's another one I've shown to people and they've gone, what? And I'm like, don't you know that's that shot from Tenebrae or what? You know what I mean? But people don't get it. It's only nerds that really understand how good it actually is, I think.
I would encourage people as well, track down their YouTube channel, because some of their shorts are amazing. There's one there called Cool Guys, which is kind of inspired by those like frat boy, summer break, spring break movies. That is just, again, like all other films, goes in a direction you would never in a million years predict.
Divorced Dad too. I think you might be able to watch the whole series of Divorced Dad on the Vimeo now.
Right,
which
nice.
is kind of about a newscaster whose life has fallen apart while he's doing this show or whatever he's doing. It's really, really good.
Okay, dude, so have you got any honourable mentions for us?
Right, so The Editor was on there, Tenebrae was on there. Tenebrae is probably my favourite.
Good.
I think Suspiria is my favourite Argento, but I think Tenebrae is my favourite Giallo he did. But just because Blade in the Dark's a little, not Blade in the Dark, Blade of the Crystal Plumage is a little bit too straight for me. I really like it. I think it's good, but it's slightly too classy for me. I much prefer Tenebrae. Because of how OTT all the kills are and how ridiculous it is. There's that whole crane shot that goes through a window and sees somebody and goes over the top of the building. And then, there's some amazing camera work in that. I think it's one of the first Giallos I saw, and it really blew my mind what the camera was doing. Because I think at the time I was just learning how to block a scene and where to put a camera to be able to cut. So when I saw that, I was like, what's he doing with the camera? Like, he's going wherever he wants. This is amazing. And I think that really blew my mind. And there's also some amazing, really bright Technicolor blood in Tenebrae, especially when it's spraying on a wall at one point. It's just an amazing, it's a really amazing film, really great. And then the other one was the one I just mentioned accidentally, which was Lamberto Bava's A Blade in the Dark, which I absolutely love. It's almost my old pick, actually, because, he's the son of Mario Bava, who we've talked about loads. And he did kind of Demons and Demons 2, and he did kind of more straight horror stuff, and then he did this really cool Giallo called A Blade in the Dark, which is slightly similar to Barbarian. Actually, he's about a composer, again, working in a remote place to come up with a soundtrack for a film. But that's a really good kind of proto-slasher Giallo number. That's got some really cool kills in it. A lot of really good killer POVs in that one. If you're looking to find some good killer POVs for inspiration, then The Prowler or Rosemary's Killer from the 80s and Blade in the Dark, those two wicked. Torso was on there.
Definitely.
Bliss was on there as well. Have you seen Bliss? It's not a Giallo, but stylistically I kind of feel like...
Oh, so, no, that doesn't ring a bell. What year was that?
I don't know. It's 2016, 2018 or something. So
right.
Joe Bigos that did VFW, Almost Human.
I'm with you. Yes, I've seen it, mate. Sorry, it's such a generic title for what it is.
But I almost considered trying to crowbar it into my suggestions because I was just like, the style of it, the music of it, the way it's shot, how experimental it was. A lot of it was improvised.
A lot of the visuals borrow from that somebody losing their mind visual kind of thing. Yeah, I can see that, mate. I can see that.
Set in its own world. That's something that maybe not be a strict Giallo, but definitely something I'd recommend watching is Bliss by Joe Bigos because it's a really cool...
Yeah.
It was the film he made when he got fed up of trying to get money to make films because he was trying... I think he did Almost Human and then he was trying to get money to get something off the ground and he got so pissed off with fucking business people that he just got a bunch of mates, got a bunch of money and just shot this film on 16, I think it was, wasn't it? And it's rough and it's gritty and there's only a couple of actors in it and he's throwing blood around everywhere and there's loads of rock bands and all the actors are wearing his clothes from his wardrobe. He just gave him his t-shirts and was like, just wear this, and all the bands are his mates. It's a really cool kind of underground love letter to film, like fuck you filmmaking, just for the love of it, rather than by committee and for money and with producers and all. So I like it for that. It's punk.
Is that still on Shudder? I remember seeing it on Shudder.
It might still be on Shudder. You can
definitely worth catching.
You can also get it though. You can get it on DVD and Blu-ray release in the UK, and it's super cheap. Cool. Definitely watch Bliss. Cool.
Right, before we wrap up, I also want to drop a couple of book recommendations. So if you guys want to know more, I would definitely recommend checking out the guidebooks from Troy Howarth. So I think there's 3 volumes so far, So Deadly, So Perverse. It goes through, kind of like the golden period is volume 1. So I think that's like 61 to 74. Then volume 2 is like 74 through to like 2013. And then volume 3 is like stuff not shot in Italy, but has clearly been inspired by the Giallo subgenre. Definitely worth tracking those books down. A slightly more academic text, but mentioned the guy earlier. So Dr. Michael Coven wrote a book called La Dolce Morte. It is amazing. Within the book, he kind of explores the themes and the boundaries of the genre, and really goes into the context of how these films were made, but also how they were received. So, talking about they were classed as, like really, I suppose, the junky blockbusters of their day. And so they were shown in these cinemas, which were basically like courtyards in rural Italy. So, people would talk over them, they'd be sitting around tables watching these films. And so that kind of influenced how they were made. So every 5 minutes there'd be a kill or whatever like that. And that was to keep people's attention. And if there wasn't a kill, you'd see, a pair of boobs or something like that to, again, keep drawing the audience back. So they'd be chatting, something suspense was happening, and then back to having a natter or whatever with, people around the table. So definitely check out those books, guys. It'll really help, further and deepen your love of the subgenre. Okay, so that is us on Giallo films. Is there anybody out there who is absolutely incensed that we haven't picked their favourite Giallo film? If so, let us know in the comments.
Didn't even give the definition of what Giallo means or where it came from, and we both know that information and we forgot to say it. But there we go. Look it up. Look it up. Watch a documentary called All the Colours of the Giallo, which is on Prime as well. It's really worth watching.
It's on Prime. I think it's also on Arrow Player as well at the moment. So yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm assuming, guys, people should know what the Giallo genre is at this point. Okay, so Tom, next episode is your pick.
Yes.
What subgenre are we going to do?
Right, we're just going to progress and we're going to do slashers, because I'm writing a slasher. I'm shooting a music video next month that is kind of a POV slasher movie for a band. So I'm watching a lot, which is why I mentioned The Prowler earlier. I'm watching loads of slashers at the moment, and I'm writing a slasher. So yeah, I think because my head is already into that, I think that'll be fun.
Good call. No, looking forward to it. Okay, guys. So if you have any suggestions about slasher films that we should check out, or alternatively, we'd like to hear you guys about what your favourite Giallo films are. Just let us know.
And can we include franchise, or does it have to be specific film? So so can I pick Friday the 13th as one of my picks, or do I have to pick Friday the 13th Part 3?
I think lead with a specific film, and then you could talk about your love of the franchise overall.
All right, let's do that then.
Because otherwise, man, it's just going to be franchises, Awesome. Okay, so let us know over on Twitter. We're at James and Tom Do. And on Instagram, we are the more fleshed out James and Tom Do Horror. So, guys, please join us next time to see what or who James or Tom will do.
I like that. That's good.